So you learn how to embed web fonts in your web pages. Now, some of these fonts need to be licensed, and the licensing can be pretty expensive. It can cost you a few $100s. So this is where web font services can help. The most popular service is Google Web Fonts, which gives you access to tons of free fonts. All these fonts are absolutely free. You can use them on any website you want. You also have paid services like Adobe Fonts, Fonts.com, FontDeck, and so on. All these services have a subscription model, so you pay a low monthly or an annual fee and get access to thousands of beautiful fonts. In my experience, these fonts often look better than the free fonts you get from Google. But that's subjective. You might be completely happy with the free fonts on Google Web Fonts. In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to use Google Web Fonts. So head over to fonts.google.com. On this page, you can see the trending fonts. We can also change the sort order and look at the most popular fonts. So Roboto and Open Sans are two of the most popular fonts. We can also search for a font by its name, like Open Sans, or we can browse through their collection. So we can filter by category. So here we have categories like serif, sans serif, display, handwriting, and monospace. Let's say we're looking for a sans serif font. So we can deselect these categories. And now all we have here are sans serif fonts. Some of these fonts are really beautiful. So let's look at Open Sans. Now over here, we can type a sentence and see how this sentence looks like with Open Sans in different styles. So on the top, we have Open Sans Light with a weight of 300, which is really thin. And as we go down this list, the font gets thicker. So let's say we're interested in Open Sans in regular style. It's right here. So we can select this font. Now on this panel, we can see instructions on using this font. Let's not worry about it for a second. We'll come back here shortly. So we want to use Open Sans Regular and Bold. Bold is right here. So I'm going to select this as well. Good. Now down below, we can see the glyphs or the characters in this font. So these are all the characters that are included in this font. Now, one of the drawbacks of using the services is that here we cannot apply subsetting. So if you're using only English letters, we cannot exclude these extra characters to reduce the font size. That's one of the limitations here. Now down below, you can see information about this font, the designer, and the licensing. In this case, this font is licensed under the Apache license, which allows us to use it freely in our products and projects. Now, one of the sections that I love about this page is that we can see the popular pairings with Open Sans. For example, we can see the combination of Roboto with Open Sans. So right here, we have a heading and some text. Open Sans is used in the heading and Roboto is used in the body text. We can swap the order. Now we can see Roboto here. We can change the style of Roboto and make it bold. Good. That looks pretty nice. And over here, you can see Open Sans for the body text. I think this is a great combination. So now we can click on this plus icon to select these fonts. Good. Now on the top, we can click on this icon to bring back that panel that contains instructions for using this font. So here we can quickly review the fonts we have chosen. We have Open Sans in two different styles, regular and bold. We can deselect them if we don't want them. And by the way, make sure not to bring extra fonts because each font increases the size or the cost of downloading your web pages. So only use the fonts you really need, okay? So we have Open Sans in two different styles and Roboto in bold. We're happy with this selection. Now, to use this, we're going to copy these two link elements and put them in our HTML markup. So copy. Here in index.html, in the head section, we're going to paste the code before the links to our style sheets because these fonts should be loaded before we can use them in our style sheet, okay? So let's paste them. What are these? The first one is a link element with the relationship of pre-connect. This basically tells the browser that our page is going to establish a connection with this domain and retrieve content from there. This is just a tiny optimization technique to start the process as soon as possible. Now, the second link element is a reference to a style sheet. So this long URL that you see here, if we copy this and open it in our browser, we get a style sheet with a bunch of font face rules. So when using font services, we're not going to add these font face rules to our style sheet. the service, in this case Google, provides these rules for us. So here we have a rule for a font family called Open Sans. You can see the URL of the font file on Google servers. So the font files are not stored on our server. They're not going to be included in our website. They will be served from Google, okay? Now, back to the instructions. So we added these elements in our HTML markup. Now, we can simply use these fonts like a regular font. So back to our style sheet. For our body text, we're going to use Open Sans. So I'm going to replace this custom name that we declared using the font face rule with Open Sans. Save the changes. Now, here's what we get, but our heading is still using a serif font. So back to our style sheet, I'm going to change the font family for H1 to Roboto. Now, because this is a sans serif font, I would like to include a web-safe font stack here as well. So we type Arial, Helvetica, and sans serif. Okay, that is safer. Now, here's the end result. Now, one last thing before we finish this lesson. Back to index.html, look at the URL for this link element. So we have fonts.googleapis.com/CSS2. Now, after question mark, we have a bunch of parameters. These are called query string parameters. So we have a parameter followed by an equal sign and a value. So family is the name of the parameter, and what we have after the equal sign is the value of this parameter. So here we have open plus sans. The reason we have a plus sign here is that we cannot have a space in a URL. So the space has to be converted to a plus sign, okay? Now, after open sans, we have colon, weight at 400, semicolon, 700. So we're telling Google that we want to get open sans in two different weights, 400 and 700. Now, in the future, if you recognize that you no longer need this font in bold, you can come back here and remove 700. Or if you want to add an extra weight, you can add it and separate it using a semicolon, like this, okay? Now, I'm going to simplify this by removing these two extra weights. So we have open sans with the weight of 400. After that, we have an ampersand. An ampersand is used to separate multiple parameters. So look, right after that, we have another query string parameter called family. Now look at the value, Roboto, with the weight of 700. Now, let's say in the future, we decide that we no longer need Roboto. So we can come back here and remove the second parameter and its value. So everything from family up to the next ampersand. Now, in this demo, I'm not going to delete it because I already used Roboto for the heading, okay? Now, look, we have another ampersand followed by another query string parameter. The name of this parameter is display, and the value is swap. So this is the font display property that we talked about in the last lesson. So by default, the length that Google generates uses the swap technique. But if you're not happy with this, you can always come back here and use a different value. So this is all about using Google Web Fonts.